Very good afternoon, Sunday afternoon here in Devon, UK. Sam coming to you from Relove Guitars with the door shut, even though it's bright outside. And I've got James's, what do they call this thing? They call this thing a J Bass, so I suppose it's a Squier J Bass thing. And this thing came to me for a setup, excuse me, along with his Indonesian-made Affinity, same factory, same brand, his Affinity Squier Strat, which I did yesterday. And this thing is, again, the same sort of thing. It's a very nice basic thing, and they have a lovely neck, really nice wood, skunk stripe, and everything about this is a good looking beastie. And the only thing about this that I noticed straight away was how high the action was. And on doing a little check, I've lowered the E on this, but on checking, the E was 4 mils at the last fret, which is pretty high, so it was way up here. Also, it has a lot of relief. I can't remember how much it was now. I measured it. It's about 1 millimetre and something relief, and then it had a first fret action of 1.5 millimeters, which is huge, really. The question is how much do you need? Well, if you look at a bass string, more so even than a guitar string, bass string moves a lot, and when you hit it a lot, side to side or up and down, it kind of makes it moves around a lot, especially the closer to the centre of the string, the more it moves. And so you need enough clearance for that to move, and you need that. The clearance has to be a combination of the action you've got. So if you have a very high action, you can have a flat neck. If you have a lower action, you tend to need a little bit of curvature in the neck to allow the string to move. So in a way, there's nothing either inherently good or bad about a flat, dead straight neck. It just tends to be that if you put a little curvature into the neck, then you can have a lower action, which a lot of people like. So the question on this one is, and I don't have any really tight specs for this, so James hasn't said I need a setup that's exactly like this. What he's looking for is low and light, but within the kind of playability of a bass. So what we know from this is set really high, we can play all the notes. Actually, they're not all perfect even still, but you can play all the notes. So the first thing I did was I just dropped the action on the E string to see what happened. You start to see a little buzzy at that end now, but that was down to, for experiment's sake, put that down to 2 millimeters. So I dropped 2 whole mils off the action here, but it's still very high off the first fret. So what I did was I clamped it with a capo and pretended I'd taken the action down to give a first fret action of what this actually turns out to be about 0.4. So we've got a nice low action on the E. And we get a bit choky up here, obviously. So we've got some frets up here that interfere with having a very low action, but there's no reason why we don't go for that and take care of those with a little bit of fret leveling. So what I've decided to do is, I don't know if you can see this on here, but I don't know if you can see how big that gap is on the first fret. It's pretty huge. As I say, it's 1.5 millimeters. Now, on a guitar, I sort of let I took my original cue from the geometry of the neck. So if you have a lowish action and you first fret it with the capo, and then you read what the first fret action is over there, you notice it plays. First of all, you notice it plays fine. So you go, well, look, it's got a 0.3 or 0.4 action over the first fret. So why would you go any much higher than that if it plays perfectly well? And then you'd say to yourself, well, what is the advantage of it being 3 times that over the actual first fret because of the way it's set on the nut? And actually, I don't really see there is any advantage. There isn't any. There's no kind of slap that you're avoiding. Plays just as well open here as it does here. But what you are getting for your money is you're getting a harder string to fret down here at this end. And that's really the only issue here is how much harder it is to play because of the overall height. Now, I've said many times before that the height of your action tends to be dictated by the quality of the underlying frets. And so for most people on basses and electric guitars, not so much on acoustics, but certainly on electrics and basses, the setting or the action you set, the lowness of the action you set tends to be dictated by how fast you run into the uneven frets. So on this guitar, we kind of notice some up here. Not the last one because there's nothing after it, but the one before. So the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th frets are sticky. They don't work very well. So the first thing I'm going to do, well, first thing I've done is I've taken the action down a little bit on the E, and I'm going to follow suit with the rest of the strings, and I'm going to just do it by eye to begin with, and then I'm just going to measure across. I'm going to go from the 2mm on the E string up to about 1.5 or 6 or something like that on the G string, and bearing in mind that obviously there's a radius on this neck as well, which we're going to try to roughly follow. We can't exactly follow it because you've only got 4 strings to kind of follow it, but we're going to obviously aim to follow the radius as we go. This is currently 3mm at the last fret, so I'm going to lose a millimetre off here as well, and then bring the others into line. So this is again just an eyeballing version for the time being, which probably needs some fine tuning. I'll just look at it with my eyes. So like I said, we've got 2 there, it's a bit difficult, it's under the shadow, 2 there, something very similar there, a little bit lower there, and a bit high there. So take this down a tiny bit, and we can make it exactly mimic the settings on the E string, which is something like that. So let's just tune it. Now it's interesting, this is fretting out a little bit, but one of the things that I noticed about this guitar is how much relief there is in the neck. So as I'm adjusting the action, I'm also going to flatten out the neck a little bit and just see what we have got. So like I say, it's over, it's well over a millimetre there. Let's just check it for fun. We'll go get it, we'll go 1 mil at the last. Got to try and squeeze them together. 1 millimetre as a test. And we'll go roughly halfway. Oh, it's way above. That's kind of 1.34, something like that. So we've got loads of relief in there, and we can get some of that out. So to flatten it out, we're going to need to tighten it up. I'm just going to put it under here and do a couple of little cranks with that and just see where it comes to. I'll leave that in there for a minute. So I'm just looking to see what the adjustment is. Okay, and really I'm just eyeballing it. Is that less than the 1.5 millimeters we had before? I think it is. So what we might find is, because it's got now less of an extreme curve on it, we might find that these frets up here are going to hit less. We're still finding they're hitting, but that's because of uneven frets. So that's why the action on this neck was set so high, because we have got some pretty appalling frets going on here. And still, you can see visually, you can see quite a curve on this, quite a relief curve. But a relief curve in and of itself isn't any problem. It should with a relief curve like that, it should play better than it currently does. So let's see what we ended up with roughly at the moment. Yeah, that's quite a bit under what we had. Let's go for half a mil. Still more than half. I would say it's about 0.75 of a mil, so it's quite a lot still. But we wouldn't expect all these notes to be dead, other than the fact that the frets are not good at this end. So that's kind of one of the limitations of a low action on this guitar, is the frets. Now it may be, because it's a bass and it's relatively new terrain for me, it could be that we just don't get a very low action out of this, and we may settle for, instead of the 1.5, which is half what it was, we might go for a 2 on this. But I like to begin with aiming for something relatively low, so I've aimed at a 2 to 1.5 down here, and obviously I'm going to take down the action at the first fret. So you can see that what I'm doing is I'm doing a mixture of moving from backwards and forwards between these three things: the neck relief, the action, and the first fret action. I'm not doing them in any set order, I'm just looking at them each as they change. These frets are evil. I'm going to put my spectacles on, and I'm just going to double check these, the right ones on, check these, the action over the last fret here. Okay, so now with that, so I've lowered that with the first fret, pretending I've done the first fret by using the capo. So that's a kind of an extreme. I don't think I will take the first fret action down quite as low as the capo has it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to conservatively go for my 2mm with the capo on there, which will rise up a little bit when I finally do the first fret action, which will be slightly higher than the capo has it right now. So that's, this is why it's not a, I'm not aiming for a precise thing. That's 2mm now on that low E, the only E, and I'm going to go kind of just under 2 now on the A. So a little bit of readjustment, and we should clear some of the nasty noises. But like I say, I'm thinking conservatively, because as I set the first fret action, I'm not going to be quite as extreme as if I have the capo on, which means that my playing action will rise just a tiny fraction anyway. So a couple more half turns. So I'm going up in a little gradient across these 4 strings from 2 on the E to, one, you could do it in 0.25 if you want, so 175 there. Now I'm going to need to go to 1, let's say 1, no, it wouldn't be 175, would it be 2 to 1, let's say 1, 8, and then we want 1, 6-ish on this D string. So we've got 1.23, something like that, a bit more, and then we go to 1.5, so we've got 1.2, a bit more, 1.2, now we are on 2, so we come back a little bit, half a turn on each side. So you see it's kind of, can't do any harm. There we go, we're just over, about right, and then we're a little bit low on the G at this point in time, so 2 turns or complete turn on both sides of the G, and then we're exactly on 1.5. Like I said, now that will raise a fraction when I set the first fret action down there to be a little bit more than we currently have with the capo. So here is our guitar kind of now with our new low action. Much better. Bit of choking. Bit of choking up there. So we've got some work to do on those frets. And if I just, let me just do one more check. Let's see where do it the right way around. Let's see where the neck relief is finished up. I'm happy with that. I'll leave that there for now. So after a bit of toing and froing from either end, and you can see, like I said, there's no sort of scientific, we do this and then that goes to that. If you have a sort of value that you aim for, that's fine. I'm doing this, as you can see, by feel, based on what we've got and what it can do, and a couple of principles which just say there's no reason why that has to be 1.5 millimeters like it currently is, nor necessarily does it have to be quite as low as this one, this 0.4 here, but can't really lying down, but standing up you could say, well, that's just about okay. But you could say that's actually just hitting the whatchamacallit, fret, so we don't want to go as low as that. Actually, it's not bad though. So we could go as low as that, but we're not going to. I'm going to aim for a 0.5 over there as my target. Where have I gone here? 0.5. So I'm going to go 0.5 as a first fret action on these strings, which means I've obviously got to take them up down a little bit. I'm going to aim for my my 2 millimeters to 1.5 at this end, and I'm going to make sure that there isn't so much neck relief that the whole thing is like a banana. Because what happens, believe it or not, is if you have a lot of neck relief, you'll create a bit more clearance between this fretted note and that fret, because it's curving away downwards. But as you come up this side in a strange sort of way, you've kind of got frets coming up again on this side of the curve, because it curves in the middle of the rod in the neck. So up here you actually meet the curve. The more curved it is, the more the frets are coming up, and you actually start to get more of the chokes up here. So it's a kind of interesting playoff. But the beauty about it is you can't do any harm with trying it out. You know, I've adjusted the truss rod, it hasn't broken anything. You can raise and lower the strings, see how it sounds and feels, and then ultimately what we'll aim for is an action which is more like that than it was, which is you know, like 2 millimeters lower down here, easier to play all the way. We'll level some frets to clear up the choking at this end, which is probably why the action was set so high anyway. And then we'll also take down the nut slots here, which are big chunky things. So it's going to be a combination of a couple of different tools I've got here, which some bass bass nut files, which aren't quite as wide as this. So we'll end up cutting downwards a bit using these, but also some old strings, which we'll use to kind of round out the thing. So it'll be quite a challenging thing to do, and that's the thing we ought to actually do next. So I know what the well, I'll measure these. Oh no, it's inside. We had 45. Actually, it was more like 43, but we'll go 45, 65, 85, 105, which was roughly the gauges of these strings. Now that means I kind of run out of files, nut files, very, very quickly. I've got a 48 in here, which will do for the first one, and then I'm on my own, and I probably do need to get the thing back, the vernier gauge back. But anyway, I've got a couple here which they have their numbers on them, but I can't remember what the reading is on them, so I'll have to guess. But actually, they don't go much more than about 50. I think it's about the widest one. I can always double check, so we can, for example, take that one out and drop in that one. Yeah, just about that. So we're going to be using I can't remember. Is that right? No, it's this way. Right. So yeah, we'll need to use a combination of different things, which will be one of those, and then we're onto some welding nozzle cleaners, which are big chunky ones. I have a range of different size strings, and I've also got some snipped off bass strings here, especially for the job. But I will need to go. So there's that one, for example, is the right diameter for this fella over here, but yeah, there. Need to just get the vernier caliper thing to measure them up. But there we go. That's the idea. We'll take this down in the same manner as normal. We'll just lower these down to get the kind of 0.5 value over the first fret. Now, I mean, in a sense, you could, if you measured it, and I think, did I say it was the same on both sides? So technically, you could, since they're all sitting at the actual same height, it's probably easier to take this off. Remove this from the underside, actually, brain. So let's just drop this off and see if it's easy enough to get this out, because if it is, we can just do, instead of cutting away at the things, we can just remove some from the underneath. As long as you keep it consistent, then that's kind of a simpler way of doing it. But it all depends on whether the nut comes out without argument, and I've got little hammery things to try and do that. Like I say, it's just a quicker, simpler thing. Now I'm going to use, I'm going to drop the knob thing on the floor. I'm going to use, oh God, what's his name? Chris's little hammery thing here to try and free up the nut, just to see if it will get moving for us. It's tricky in here because this is a delicate little bit of stuff, and if you hit it too hard, you do run the risk of chipping it off, which of course you can stick it back on, but it's not ideal. So then we have the side of this which technically can move it. So if it's been stuck down, you haven't got a lot of hope of that. So another way, I have a bunch of spare nuts as it happens, but I don't know what they're cut to, so I prefer to use this one again. So if that doesn't work, what I'm going to now use is a little flat screwdriver and just do a little bit of wedging under there and lever it out. So it's a very, very light touch with a tiny bit of glue. It's actually not a bone nut, so you know, I do have bone nuts kicking about in here, although I don't know where they've gone. Are they in the other one? The other one. No, those are Strat nuts. A bunch of bone nuts in the body. They are somewhere. I've got a whole tin full of them. Let's have a look. Let us not give up. Let's go and have a look. Nut blanks. Base nuts. Base nut. Bone base nuts. Hang on, this one's already been done. Of all the ones I choose, I've chosen one that's been sanded or something. That should go into the already knackered department up there. So I've got one here which is a bone variant on this. It doesn't have the same gauge, quite exactly the same gauge by the looks of it, so we might have to work that. Let's just have a look and see how it would fit. It needs a bit of thinning down. I prefer to replace it with bone than just go back in with plastic, because plastic is pretty horrid. I'm just going to look at what the, and see that kind of changes the game. If I reuse this, I can take some off the underside, and we can go with that since it's already cut. If I use the bone one, then we have to start the cutting process again. Conundrum. What should we do? Should we go with the cutting? I mean, it takes a little bit longer. It takes quite a bit longer, but let's see what we get. I think the funny thing is I didn't actually intend to buy these bone nuts. I think I ordered a whole set of Strat nuts from China, and I think they sent me the base. Sorry, I meant to get bone Strat nuts, and they sent me a whole set of bass guitar nuts as well, which of course I kept since they were darned useful. Now these are Not the same gauge, although obviously they sit in them fairly comfortably, but I'm going to need to take them down. So let me just do a quick check, physical check, and see how high this is. Wow, that's a good. How many millimeters have we got here? A lot. We are looking at, lighting isn't that good. We're looking at 2.5 millimeters. So we could lose 2 millimeters off this nut just to kind of get into the right sort of place. So let's just do that first. We can always go back to the original plastic one if we have to, if it's too much trouble to do this. But let's start with taking off 2 mils. I'm not sure I've got a sharp dressed pen or anything knocking around right now, but my pencils are somewhere else. That's a bit of a pain. Find something to draw a sharpish line with. Don't come along. I believe it. No, that's blunt as anything. Right, there's the nearest to sharp dressed thing. So 2 millimeters off the bottom of this. 2 millimeters off the bottom of this. It's quite a lot, to be honest. 1, 2. Oh my goodness. I'll be with you in a second. Please, just go away and make a cup of tea. And the pen doesn't work. Holy moly. Okay, let's make a straight line, please. Well, that's about as crap a line as I could possibly draw, but it'll do. I can see it. And then it's a case of making it work, cutting it down, and just keeping it in a straight line as possible. And just making sure basically that the bottom of the nut is square to the side, so we need a 90-degree angle, and that's sort of the thing to do just by eye, really. Okay, bit of a slant building up there, so go against it and wear it back down flat. Have a look close. Takes a while to get rid of this. You could do it with put it in a vise and do it with a file, although sometimes that ends up splintering it, which can be a bit of a pain because you sort of have to start all over again. Okay, a bit more weight on the treble end. Also got to cut down a little bit further. Well, actually it's not down we've got to cut once we've done this, it's more about widening the slots. So once we're just about there on the reduction, I've just got to square it off. And check it for squareness. It's almost there. And yeah. Right, just have a look at it for feasibility first, and then if it's good we'll glue it and start cutting. So it's actually maybe overcut. Is it overcut on that end? And that's because that end actually is the right size of slot, so I've caught myself out there. But it may still be just about the right height. No, is that 0.5? Actually, it's dead on. That's higher. Okay. It is dead on. So I'll use that. I was kind of got lucky with that. Let's have a note. Okay, so a bit more work on the bass side. That's fine. What I will do before I do anything else, I will glue that in place now. Sorry, I got you looking in the wrong direction. I do apologise. I'm going to glue this in, just lightly tack it down so it stays in place while we work on it. And mainly, just looking at the condition of the frets, not too bad. They haven't been played much, so they're looking a little bit on the kind of grubby side, but the fret level we're going to do will take care of that as well. So I don't understand super glue. I don't know how many of you guys use it, but I find super glue is the most bizarre substance in the world. It's like one of those 1970s horror films starring Vincent Price or something. It comes out of the pot on its own. I don't know how it manages to do that, but it manages to climb out, even though, I mean, I sort of understand if it was under some sort of pressure and it then sort of leaps out or gets squeezed out under some sort of pressure, but it doesn't. It just comes out and finds its way down the side of the pot by itself, which I find really odd. I find it sometimes with great big sort of sheets of kind of dried glue on the side of the pot. Why, I don't know. And then you can't get the lid off and it's stuck to the surrounding areas. It's like it's trying to escape. Okay, so I will at some point just now I will stop the video because I need to go and get the vernier gauge to do this, just to make sure I'm getting the right size for this. This is quite sharp, but it's only the edges and we'll need to round that off afterwards. I've seen the other pen. Ha, good. Right, bone nut fitted, plastic nut put to one side for possible use if all else fails. But that's good, that's improved that. And then we will basically go get the vernier gauge so we can work out which of these things to use. First fret is spot on, but everything else needs working on, so see you in a minute. Oh, sorry, I forgot to close the door. Hang on. I'm going to do some spray in a minute, but meantime, so I've got a set of strings here, leftover strings, which actually match these perfectly, which go up to the size I'm talking about, and they're probably just as easy to use as trying to do it with any pipe cleaning things. So I'm starting with the low E, for example. Low E? No, yes, the low E, the E. And what I'm using is I'm using this to just widen out the using the rough part of the string to kind of wear away at the bone, and you can see it's doing it slowly but surely. And we just go up to, is that the right one? Yeah, this is the biggest one. That's 105, same as the gauge I'm going to be putting back on here. So it's not quick. Now what we can do is we can also use the biggest of the ones we've currently got, and you know, it takes a bit of sort of round and about wearing away to do, so it's not the most accurate, but it does take a bit down, and we can and then we just check and we take it off and do it again. So it's just a matter of, you know, it's just a matter of wearing down the slot until it's the right size, or sorry, the right height for what we're looking for, which is the 0.5 mark. And I'm trying to do as normal, angling it backwards so that the string comes to the front, upwards towards the front of the nut. I'm just going up to approximately the pitch, and I can see it's a lot lower than it was. But I say you can use other things to help cut down into the nut. Obviously you've got to be careful you don't go too far, and you're going to need to catch up with your string like this. You could use other files, like there, for example, there are jeweler's files, which I've got some of. I can show you one of those. So let's have a look. We've got a jeweler's file in here that has a roundish profile somewhere. We've got a couple of them, in fact. Let's just grab these. So these would be, one of them's older than the other. But again, this is actually not a bad size piece to use. Just going in there like that, just helping. I've got a bad finger cut, but anyway, we're just helping to take down some of the material. We don't want to go too far, so we're not far off now. That's very close, and it's the right size, the right kind of gauge, and to just sort of ensure that it's finally the right gauge before we stop, we can just use the offcut, and you can see it's actually quite abrasive because of the way the string is wound. So it gives ourselves kind of a decent profile into the slot, so it's not square or rough. And again, we can just take a little bit more with this diamond coated thing. Just going up to approximately pitch, mainly so that the string sits all the way into the slot and doesn't get caught somewhere, give us a false reading. That's the main thing. So again, just kind of cleaning out or ensuring the slot is the right profile for the string, which is quite good because this is the exactly 105. And we are very close. I mean, there's daylight under there, but it's definitely lower than it was. One of the difficulties of doing this is it's very hard to get a slope without hitting the back of the rosewood, especially if you actually want that backwards tilt. You tend to end up hitting the rosewood part of the fingerboard that extends beyond the nut. Very difficult to get any filing done without that, to be honest. You can see with a lot of hitting, I'm just beginning to start clatter on the that thing. It's called a feeler gauge. So I'm just getting very close to where I want to be, and I'm just doing the last final bit of rounding off with this thing. It's tight. It's hitting the rosewood a tiny little bit, but I'd rather get the height correct and have that than not have it. If you see what I mean. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to stop there with that one. So that's my my E done, and now again I'm going to have a look what we've got with the next one up, which is the A, and I've got a version of it here to work with, and again we've also got the file to get started with. Now this obviously we don't want to go as far with this, we don't want it quite as wide, so I'm just using this to do the digging work, and then I'm going to use the surplus string or the spare string to do the sort of shaping work, and making sure that all the time I'm not going so far down with this process that I overcut, go where I don't want to go. A little bit of work in the sort of backwards department, and this is what's good about these jeweler's files, is you can sort of gauge how far you want to go in terms of the diameter of the file. It has obviously a varying diameter, it tapers, and, you know, but this bit here doesn't obviously. So once you've got your cutting done with the diamond file, you sort of level out the whole profile with this bit here, which is the same thickness all the way through. Not quite there yet. Keep going. Wrong one. So you can see that when it comes to the bass guitar, it starts to be a combination of tools to get where we want to get to. The little sets of files obviously don't work. You can buy a complete set of nut files for bass guitars for all different kinds of gauges, but I've already paid so much for the guitar ones, I haven't really got the wherewithal to spend a load more. So I just know what I'm trying to achieve really, which is backward facing slot, which is the correct profile when it's done, and holds the string at the height off the first fret that I want. So it's not rocket science, it's just a matter of careful sort of mechanical engineering, I suppose. Getting there, very close. A little bit of fresh air still, so I'll do a tiny bit more using this. I'm pressing down a little bit on the end to give it some bite, which is sort of why it touches the rosewood eventually. It's not far. Okay, I'll stop there for a minute on that one, and then we'll go to the... Now these are closer, these are very much closer, so the D string, just going to pull it to one side and just do a little bit of work here, but it's not far off the mark anyway, and it's this will be what, 65 hundredths, 65 thou. And again, I don't have a file that will do this, so I'm using the... Yeah, we're on. I'm going to stop there with that. Right, just tune them up. Okay, I'm good with that. I'm going to hang this baby up for a minute. So what we've got is a much lower action all round. Conservative, I haven't gone extreme. I'm going to put these together in this little container here because these are handy. This sort of fairly standard size, the 45 to 105s. Will they stay in there? Just. Let's put everything else away. Yeah, so it's a good little size. But we got down to a conservative playing first fret action on those. I haven't gone anywhere near the danger zone of going too low for a bass, so it's fine. There is more room if anybody wanted to go lower, but it's, like I say, conservative means it's going to be a considerable improvement whilst being plenty of distance off the critical, away from the critical. Sometimes on guitars I've gone down to the absolute bare minimum, which is usually about 0.25 on an electric guitar, or 0.2, although, and that feels a little bit low actually, but having said that, the actual clearance on an electric guitar with the capo on is about 0.1 over the first fret, so even 0.2 is, you could argue, is sort of conservative. So what I'm going to do at this point in time now, since we know that we've got a much lower overall action, what we're finding is we've got some unclean notes down there. Everything's fine down that end. Yeah, but we've got some choking, slightly choking notes at the sim, which tells me that we do need to give it a bit of a fret level, which will have the added bonus of cleaning up all these strings, all these frets anyway, giving them a new lease of life, which they look pretty old and tired at what people call the dusty end. You won't be able to see it, but it's almost green with mould up there. So a standard precision fret leveling, which is, first thing we do is just slack off the strings, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the G on. I'm just going to, lovely. Going to do all of this in marker pen, and then put the strings back on and tune them up to that top string again. So this marker pen, its purpose is to allow me to check the progress of the fret leveling. It's very useful as an indicator. It's skating over the kind of green mould as it happens, but I'll put it under its little string tree. This one off for a second and just finish off the marking. Okay, so we get our bass guitar sized banana truss rod file from the shelf, and this is, it's quite hard to use actually, just because it's so flexible, so long and flexible, and so we have to do lots of careful checking to make sure it's calibrated correctly. Okay, it doesn't have to be constant pitch, all it matters is it's mostly at the correct tension, just to keep the curvature as much as possible in the neck while we do this. And so I'm going to get out the tools, and I'm going to use the little brass feet to give me, or to get my calculate or to calibrate the curvature of the rod. So let's see where we go from and to. So really we should go from end of there to middle of there to end of there. Let's go to there. Just dividing this up into two parts. That's about right. That's about right. Okay, so here we have our 3 little pieces, and now I'm going to adjust this truss rod in order to curve it just enough to mimic the curve on the neck. And when I do that, I can feel when it's doing that, which it is now, and I move that off, and I'm going to tackle the first, or the G string track where the G string runs. And I'm going to do this with this truss rod under mainly under gravity, and I'm going to try not to turn it any more or less than it already is, so it doesn't change in its profile. So as I do it, I'm kind of just keeping an eye out to see what becomes of the frets underneath, and I'm expecting to see, yeah, there's one cutting, 2 cutting up here pretty quickly, and it's no surprise at all because I've seen that's where this is choking off. I think I need to just try and prop this out slightly further out. Can I do it? No, it's going to flip over whatever I do. Okay, it's not ideal. Try up here. Not perfect, but we'll just push. Oh, that's not looking very good at all. Okay, so I'm trying to go right to the edge, but this string is sort of getting in the way. So what I'm expecting to see is that the frets, where the frets are high, it's going to cut more than where they're not. In fact, it might not even touch them at all where they're low. So a quick look shows me a whole bunch of frets here now cutting, which I was expecting because we knew that it felt congested and choked up this end. So if we now try those notes again, it's better. It's not perfect, but it's much better than it was. So the same thing applies, but I'm going to go back to calibrating this again, if I can remember where I did it. We'll calibrate it again just to make sure that we haven't moved off the mark. I want to get this as accurate as possible, and bearing in mind that this thing is sensitive to very slight adjustment here, so it's always worth just double checking the calibration on it. Again, it's gone off the curve a tiny fraction, but it really is the minuscule turn of the Allen key. And once we get it right, then we just get on and level, knowing that it probably will just slightly unwind itself as we go after a little bit of use. I'll try and keep it as same as possible. So I'm just doing everything within this G track, so from the G through to the D string, and like I say, what you see is the high frets are getting taken care of, and the low frets are more or less being missed out, and then I can see it's all up here, which is pretty much what I'd expected. So that's a good thing about doing this. When you get more experience at it, you can predict where, you know where it's going to fall. That's not bad for 1.5mm action down here, which is half what it was before. So I'm going to stop there on that one. I'm going to move to the next track, which is actually going to have the same calibration. Now this is going to have to be undone a bit because it's not going to want to move. Just want to get the string. I'd like to get this string the other side of something. That will do. It's not brilliant, but I'm going to use the rod with the same calibration again. Now I pretty much expect to find a very similar pattern of cutting, because I think the frets will continue to be high at this end sound here. So again, working all the way across from the end of the G track down to where it meets the A. And again, I'll stop. It's a bit long-winded, but you can stop, replace the string, do it up to pitch, and then try it out. Remember, we had congestion all the way up here. Way better than it was, but still a little bit congested. So again, we'll take, oh, and before we do that, let's calibrate it again just to be sure. Never trust it to be right twice. So I remember. I keep forgetting where the halfway mark is. That'll do. Again, just we'll make any adjustments. Now it's still the same curve, which is great. And a little bit of slacking off, move it out the way if possible. Again, these strings are going to go in the bin, so they're what I call sacrificial strings. And it doesn't matter, they're getting pulled from side to side, you know, and doing this job. They're expendable. We just want to use them to make sure the setup, all the frets are leveled correctly and the setup is right. Then they go in the bin and we put new ones on, which won't arrive till tomorrow sometime. But at least this guitar will be ready to fit them when they do arrive. And that's the great thing about this system now, is that once you've set the fret level, once you've leveled the frets, the neck will go back into its configuration. That's brilliant, stopping right there. It'll go into its leveled configuration as soon as you put strings back on it, so we don't have to do any more adjustment. It's pretty much done once we've done this part. Obviously there's maybe some tweaks with the electrics. I haven't had a listen to make sure it's all playing correctly, and it's about right, a bit long. Let's go to there. Right. So the reason I keep calibrating this in different places is that the relief curvature can change as you go across the neck. It is possible, and sometimes it does, so you want to make sure that you've got the right relief curve in this tool to ensure that what you're doing is relatively leveling the frets. If the relief curve is, if you don't get the right relief curve, then you'll basically take off, you'll create new unevenness somewhere, which you could do without. Now, I kind of expect to see the same pattern, even though there is a little bit of change across, especially where there is a little change across the relief, sorry, across the radius. You often find that you get a lot of cutting on one side and then it smooths out and you don't get much cutting on the other side of the same fret. But I don't expect that in this case. I think it's going to be pretty much the same all the way across. Okay, so again, cutting very heavily there, there, there and there. So it's all going as I'd expect, actually. And so I expect to find pretty close, a little bit more to do, a tiny bit more, but it's getting there. So it doesn't take too long, as you can see. It's a very effective system, and before long we've ironed out those high frets that were getting in the way of this thing playing anything like a decent action. And once you've got that, then you've got a guitar that will play as good as anybody else's expensive bass for a lot more money. You don't need to pay vast sums of money to get a bass that plays well. It's all in the condition of the frets. And actually paying a lot more money is no guarantee of getting even frets, I found. That will do me. And I'll calibrate once more for this low E. There isn't only one E on this. For the E, just once more. Always take the time to recalibrate. Don't take anything for granted. That needs a little tiny bit more turn, which I can do by hand actually. This is so sensitive. That's okay. So it's like a, I don't know if anyone's ever done any sailing, but when you when somebody goes overboard on a yacht, it's somebody's job to shout "man overboard" and stare intently, watch, see where the overboard sailor has gone. Keep an eye on your crewmate at all times, because if you lose sight of them, that's the end of them. So when I drop one of those little pieces, that's what I do. I look immediately to watch where it goes until it stops moving, and then I can know where it is. It's a man overboard or component overboard thing going on there. Okay, should be good. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to now finish the job off by shining up, or reprofiling I should say, and then polishing up these frets. So what we've got at this point in the game is we've got a new action set. We've got an altered neck relief, so there's not as much curvature. We've got a new nut with a lowered first fret action, so it's much lighter. And now we've got you know what, I'm going to go back a fraction just to that first one. From the case, the first one is the one I chicken out of first, so I'm just going to revisit that one. But apart from that, we're almost done, and once we're done, then it's a case of ditching these strings, and we'll go back and reshape, use a file to reshape the frets so that we get rid of the flat spot that's currently on them. It's good. Get rid of the flat spot that's currently on them, and then basically polish them out so that they're ready to play again, and that will make them all look as good as new, especially the dirty old ones at this end. I'm just going to give this a little bit of a harder push at this end, since I kind of wimped out a little bit on the first run, and now I kind of know that we're on track, so I'll just give it a little bit of a harder go. And that will do it for me. Also, when you do this, you have to remember that when you reprofile and polish, what you also get is you get just a little bit more taken off the frets as well as you go down. So I go right to the point where I'm comfortable that they're good, and then I do the reprofiling and polishing, and it takes another fraction of a thou or whatever it is off. So we're always going downwards a little bit. But it's always a small amount by that stage, and you're well within tolerance to still have a great playing guitar. Just makes the action increase very, very slightly. Okay, so I'm not going to really keep these strings. I don't have a use for old bass strings. It seems like a bit of a shame to kill them, but the only thing they were good for in this case was to reuse as nut files, temporary nut files, but we can get shot of them. So these are end fitting ones. But like I say, we'll do all the reprofiling and polishing of the frets prior to new frets arriving. new strings arriving tomorrow, courtesy of Amazon Prime thing. So get rid of these. Quite a lot of those in there at the moment. Okay, so while I'm at it, we've got quite a bit of gunge around here that we can clean up, and I'll get some, I won't do that on camera, but I'll get some solvent-y stuff and give that a good clean up. In the meantime, what I also do then is I'm going to repaint these frets. I'll do this bit first, and then we'll get to the sort of clean at the end of this, because it's going to get dusty again in a minute anyway, so there's no point cleaning it. So I'll just let you know that's what I'll do. Now you can see, or you may be able to see, the frets here are, you can see where they've been leveled and they're flattened off. And this next process is about reshaping them. They're quite fine frets, so I use the medium-sized part of this file, and it won't need much at all, just a little kind of scrape to just iron off the sharp shoulders of these frets. And then once that's done, I can go over it with the sandpaper, and I use 3 different grades of sandpaper to do this, and I do it off camera because it is half an hour of noise and sweat and boredom for the viewer. Not like this isn't at all, but so it takes about half an hour to clean up, polish out the frets, and I use, as I say, sandpaper, 3 grades, and followed by a set of micro mesh pads, which ranges from 1500 grit to 12,000. So by the time we get there, it's really polishing out the final bit. So it's a nice plain condition by the time we've got that done. This is pretty quick. The only time I have to sort of stick on any fret or wires where there's been a fairly flattened bit, so this takes a little bit longer at that point, but right now there wasn't so much off these that it takes too much work. It's wasn't bad condition overall. This one here is a little bit challenging. We get there. And sorry, it's not the best view in the world, but that's what the wide angle's for. Okay, so and these were the hardest hit of the frets, so it's not surprising that you have to work a little bit harder on these to get rid of the flat spot. Okay. Now once that's done, the next part of the game is to mask this off with masking tape, and it takes again a while to do because it's a big neck and there's lots of different well, we've cut some strips to make to fit, but anyway, it's a boring process, but it's necessary to do because it protects the neck from the abrasive sandpaper, and it means we can really go to town on shining out those frets. Like I said earlier, the good thing about this is once you've done the leveling part, which we've already done, the dynamics of the neck, or the physics of the neck, means that as soon as we load it again with the same gauge strings, which I've ordered, then what happens is the neck returns to the condition it was in, or the dynamic it was in, or the curvature it was in when we did the leveling. So that relative levelness returns to, it's kind of like returns to its state that it was in when we did it, and that's why I do it this way. There are a couple of reasons why, and I kind of say this every time I do this, so it's like all my videos. If you've seen it before, it's incredibly boring, but if you haven't seen it, some people don't get why I do it with a curved file, and the reason is there's twofold really. The first one is for some technical reasons it's slightly more accurate than doing it with either a flat neck, whether that's with a fret leveling file or a radius block or a beam or anything. The curved method is, for technical reasons, a little bit more accurate, and that's simply because you're leveling with the effects of compression already at play, which if you level with the neck flat and passively relaxed, or even curved using pistons, you're not putting it under the same forces of compression, and those forces of compression do change the layout or the fall of the frets to a small degree. Anyway, it's not a huge amount, but it is a little tiny bit more accurate. That's really only the byproduct, or the secondary benefit. The primary benefit is that because I'm doing it with the strings on, and because the strings are on, I can test play every string in every track. I only ever have to level as much as is required to make the action I've chosen play. And that sounds like a kind of an abstract mouthful, but it's not. In a guitar like this with small gauge frets, fairly narrow gauge, medium to narrow if anything, there's not a lot of fret material, and the last thing you can afford to do is to bash away with a method of fret leveling which takes too much away. Now with a flattened neck and a fret rocker, you're going after effectively what is an arbitrary, completely 100% levelness with the neck in that flattened position. And so you're going to take off, by definition, as much material as is required to stop your fret rocker making any noise, and therefore you can safely rest assured in the knowledge that you've got 100% even frets. But the point is, you don't need that, and what you've done is you'll have taken off a ton of material in pursuit of a level of evenness that you don't actually need, and that's cost you fret metal, and in doing so that's cost you life of the guitar, playing life basically. So the reason I do the curved leveling method is because it is more, there's a couple of reasons, but the first one is it's more respecting of the remaining fret metal, because I only level until the action I've chosen plays. And secondly, another thing about it is it's also a little bit more accurate, a tiny bit, but not so much that you really would know that much difference, but it technically is, but that's not why I do it. And the other reason, little benefit, is that because the method I use is a very narrow file, the truss rod is very narrow gauge, it respects changes. I hate when it does that. It respects changes in the radius of the guitar. It accommodates them. You have to kind of think in 3D to kind of figure out why, but it's, if you think of a slice of a compound radius neck where the radius is 9.5 at one end and 16 at the other, when you compare the two things together they look different, but when you compare a tiny little thin slice of each one together they don't look any different. So when you level them that way, using the truss rod method that I use, it accommodates changing radii without any problem at all, because it does it in such narrow samples. If you're speaking digital terms, for those of you in computer graphics would know what I'm talking about, but it does it in such thin samples that it doesn't mind that the radius is changing along the way. And it's not the case, and it's certainly not the case with a big fat 1 inch thick sanding fret leveling file of the kind I started out with. It's certainly not the case with that, and it absolutely isn't the case with a radius block, which has a set radius built into it. And if you tried to use a radius block on a compound radius, you'll grind the change of the radius down to conform with the radius on your block, and that will cost you a hell of a lot of fret metal. It'll do it, but it will cost you most of the life of the frets. The interesting thing about radius blocks is that most guitars in truth don't have an exact radius on the frets. They, due to variations I suppose in technique, they will, if it says it's 9.5, you might find it's 9.7 or 10 when it's actually done, because of how the conditions were that day. If you put a radius block that says it's 9.5 on top of that, what you'll suddenly find is that it's taking off loads of material, let's say down the edges, in order to level your frets, and you get quite a shock how much it has to take to force the actual fretboard to be whatever the radius is on the block. And again, none of that was really necessary. You're just wasting fret material. So anyway, that's my rationale. And some people commented in the past that it's impossible to do it this way, yada yada yada. And you've seen with your own eyes the notes on this bass becoming available because of the technique. So it's not rocket science, but nor is it magic, and nor is it impossible. It's very definitely efficacious, and it does hundreds of times now, several hundred times now. I've done exactly the same thing with it with very good effects. So, you know, like all things I do, there's a very strong reason for it. Some things I do, occasionally some things I do with no good reason at all, and some kind, polite commenters point something out to me, and I realise that I'm a complete dolt, and I've been doing it a certain way without thinking, and it's really great when somebody does that. But like I've always said, it's so much more appreciated when somebody does it with humour, respect, and in spirit of giving. You know, that we're all in the same thing. We all like making guitars play, or making guitars from scratch, or we all like playing guitars. And it's nice when new information comes from that perspective or from that angle. It's nothing worse than when it comes from a "you're an idiot and I'm so much better than you" kind of angle, because there's too much of it in the world. So even some people said to me, why do you put so much masking tape on a guitar? And if you, I was going to say, if you watch the sanding process, which you probably won't, because in a minute I'll switch the video off because it's boring, but you'd see that when I come up and down here with the sandpaper, the last thing I want to do is hit the nice metallic sparkly finish on the arms of this guitar, on the, you know, as it comes in towards the body here. So personally, I don't mind paying a bit extra for rolls of masking tape and making sure that I've got enough there that I feel content that this thing is protected off and I can do my work on it without any risk of it scratching. Okay, so I have a pre-cut set of papers already there. I have my block with my what do you call them, micro mesh, and this is slightly shaped, so it kind of, from use it's become fret shaped. I think I cut it a little bit like that, but it's now perfectly fret shaped. So basically for the next half an hour I like to do the first thing by hand, I don't know why, but I take the paper and I give the frets a sort of gentle going over to kind of remove all the marker pen. And I don't know why, but doing it by hand first allows me to kind of feel my way over that. And some people say, well, isn't that uneven? And yes, it is, and that might be a tiny bit more lower now than that, but oh, by the time I finish polishing it out, it won't be enough difference to make a difference. So panic ye not. You see what I'm doing is I'm just using this part of the process to eyeball what's going on with the frets, and just getting down to this end here and making sure that I'm kind of covering off everything, and that every fret has had the kind of scratches on the very top taken off, or at least smoothed out prior to kind of going after it with this, which I can't feel, and it's nowhere near as tactile as this, so just a preference, that's all. One of the things I sometimes do when I'm doing this part of the thing as well is to, I also like to press down into the frets, and fingers are riding up and over the frets to get them as round as possible. But one of the things I like to do about this stage is, while I'm at it, is just give the edges of the frets a little round off, and it just takes away, if there happen to be any sharp edges, it just takes them away. And since we're going to polish all of this out anyway, why not? it's just an opportunity, because everything after this now is just going to be sanded out completely by you know, by degrees, and so taking that little bit of any burrs off the edge, might as well. So off I go with the block and half an hour or more of noise, so I'll see you on the other side. Okay, we are, oops, radio, hang on, radio, LBC down. There we have the leveled, polished out frets, and you can see how much grunge that makes. And so having see, it's aerobic, having some tape protecting it all is a good idea, I tell you. Anyway, so what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to just take all of this off, give it a little bit of a dust down and clean, and then I'm going to oil the neck, fingerboard, fretboard, fingerboard, clean and oil the fingerboard, ready for new strings tomorrow. And then it should be a matter of getting the new strings in and then checking the intonation and adjusting if necessary. The spread on the intonation looks about right from the outset, but we'll just double check it and make sure it's right, or as near as it can be, and that will be that. And like I say, it returns to under load, it returns to the levelled state it was in when we finished with the strings on, which is the good part. And so we don't really have to worry about it. We could take the neck off, respray it, do some stuff to the body, change all the electrics, leave it off for 6 months, and then put the neck back on, load it up again, and it will go straight back into the level position. No more adjustment needed. Which is a really nice way, or nice aspect of doing this. So I know that the hard work's done, or most of the hard work's done, nearly all of it's done, and the rest should be just about getting it back into a nice sort of playing configuration, cleaned up, and the strings stretched and ready to go. So when I started doing bass guitars, I think I made the mistake of thinking, because they were essentially a slightly higher action by default than guitars, I kind of started with the mental viewpoint that I would probably do most of the setups without fret leveling. And actually, thinking back to the ones I've done, you know, it's always worked out when I have done fret leveling, and the only times it's not been a great result is when I haven't. So should have really followed my instincts on it from the beginning. And I think, you know, sometimes it gets, the thing that goes through your head is this thing about price, and you think, well, look, this is low, why don't I raise this, what's going on here? You sort of think that you know, if I don't do fret leveling, if I can get a nice action, then of course it's a little bit cheaper for the customer, or 30 quid cheaper, or whatever. You know, you're not doing, you're saving yourself an hour and a half's hard work, and saving them the cost. But it kind of doesn't make any sense if, when it comes down to it, it doesn't really work and you can't get the action that you or they want out of it. So it becomes a sort of, aiming for an economy that nobody really wants. And funny thing, I had this once upon a time, or I know that from when I worked in London with a company, and one of the things I found was that some of the people, directors, had a focus on saving money or cutting costs, not to make more profit for them as directors partly, but actually a lot to do with being able to offer services cheaper to customers. But the interesting part was that was at a time where I could tell you that the customer wasn't complaining about the price. No, and I get it that there's always some degree of, you know, pressure on budgets and so on, but in practical terms the customer wasn't balking on the price. So I could never see what the point of spending time trying to cut down on the the cost of service. I mean, I get it when people do that because it's one way of increasing profitability, but it didn't seem to make sense if the customer, just purely from a point of view that trying to save the customer money. But hey, you never know. That's maybe what the director was telling us employees, and what he really meant was he wanted to cut costs so he'd make more profit. Who knows? But anyway, so look, there's a cleaned up guitar. One thing, just thinking, one thing I will do while we're here is that there's a lot of material on this nut that we don't need, and it's sitting up really tall. So I'm going to take some of that off and just reduce it down because we don't basically need it. So prepare ye for a bit of noise. That little sharp edge, just sort of try and soften that off a little bit as we go. There's a tiny bit of blemish there which is good to get rid of. Okay, and actually there's plenty enough room for the slots to hold the strings there, so it's nice and tidy. Okay, so the last thing before we leave it for tonight is the oiling part. And somewhere I've got some oil kicking around this mess. I've got too many things going. Luckily I've got several pots of oil, although I don't know where half of them have gone. It's one of the things that you never quite get around to reordering, and you just hope that your little 3 different pots are going to last forever, which they don't, of course. So just a sort of, it's not the right word to say rehydrating, but putting some oil on to add some luster to the colour of the neck. The rosewood, it looks really nice with a bit of oil, and it isn't hydration because it's oil, not water, but it gives it that darker look and shows the grain really well. Okay, I'll do that end bit as well just to keep it in keeping with all the rest. Okay, and this will just sort of sink in overnight. There you go. So, Squier Jazz Bass, or J Bass as it's called, set up, done, waiting for new strings, and intonate, and we're ready to go. And that will be from a last fret action of 4mm on the E, we've gone down to 2, and from 3 on the G down to 1.5. We've gone from 1.5mm on the first fret down to 0.5 across all of them. And we've taken the relief on the neck from something like 1.2 or 1.3 down to something like 0.6. So it's a lot of improvement. I'll tell you what, I'm going to put it over here because I've got other things to do. So there we are. Beautiful. So thanks for watching this bit. I'll catch up with you tomorrow for the final bit of this one, and then both of James's guitars will be ready to go back, and we'll be moving on to a Chinese copy of a Fender. I'm not going to put anything about that in the title because I don't want to be abused by people who think I'm a criminal for even so much as considering setting up a customer's guitar that was made in China with a fake badge on it. And to do so doesn't mean I condone them, and it doesn't mean I would do it, but when a customer has a guitar already, and it's not illegal to buy them, when a customer has a guitar and asks you to set it up, you have to think very carefully about in what way does it serve you to turn them down and to make some sort of moral judgment on them. And it's one of those things you think quite hard about as a business, but I'm not here to make a moral judgment on somebody else, providing they're not breaking the law of the land they live in. So, you know, if it was illegal, then I would have a different take on it, but it's not illegal to buy them as yet, and So, you know, I will help to make them play like any guitar as well as they can. The argument about whether somebody should throw money after, good money after bad, or whatever people say about those things, is a different thing altogether. That's somebody's personal choice. I mean, you know, some people, I haven't got one here, but you know, there's some guitars that I might have that people would say are only good for firewood. But if you know, if they're special significance for you and you like them for a particular reason, then who's to tell you whether to invest money in them or not with a decent setup? So I treat it like any guitar that needs setting up. Anyway, enough of that. You'll see that on another video. So see you again soon. Just a quickie. Same thing applies here. Little bits of, can I get this to come out? Is there anything in here? I think I'm out. There's little bits of paint rash on this body. Come on. Always too much. Always a big lump of dried stuff and then too much. A bit of paint rash on here, which will come off with some of this fantastic paint scratch remover. And it's never actually that big a problem. It's just the fact that it's kind of, it's hit a wall or something, or you know, some part of the furniture in the house, and the paint sticks to the lacquer. Now there's a chip here which I can't get the white paint out of, but by and large they're quite, it's really good stuff. And I've used it loads, and people kind of say, oh, is the same as, can't you buy something, you know, in Halfords that does the same job, the car stuff? And I don't know if you can. You might be able to, but it isn't T-cut, and it does a particularly good job. And I've done loads of kind of tidy ups with this stuff, so it really is worth, so far it's been worth the money. So for example, there goes the white paint that was on this edge here, and there's a tiny little bit left in this crack here, but, or this ding, but it's taken away the other bit completely. Yeah, there's a little bit of glue there which is gone as well. So really good stuff. Anyway, I just thought I would recommend it. It's called Eternashine or something like that. Player's kit guitar polish. Not cheap, but very, very good stuff, however it's made. And of course, if somebody could discover the formula, then they would obviously make a fortune by selling it a bit cheaper. But then probably what they do is sell it for a similar price. Hey, welcome to the worst birthday ever. Self-pity rules, okay. It's raining, it's cold, it's supposed to be winter, and it's just crappy, and nothing else good is happening right at the moment. It's rare for me to feel that way, but I do. So there we are. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to string up this beastie, and we shall get it sort of ready to go. I just sent an email to James regarding any possible upgrades that he might want doing, because I've actually got a set of tuners. Now his Affinity Squier Strat has a dodgy tuner, the low E tuner, so it's possible if he wants we can stick a decent new set of tuners on. These are Wilkinson 19.1s. So anyway, this is these are nice big split post tuner things, or split tuner posts. So I've got to, it's very, I find them really good. A simple way of getting strings to stay on and stay in tune. Behind me I've got Chris's Chinese made P-bass copy, which I'm going to work on today as well. And that's an interesting thing, because it's obviously it's Chinese made, so it kind of looks the part, but it has a few flaws in the finish department, which is a shame really, but including probably most significantly a crack where the neck pocket, or the heel, sorry, goes into the pocket, maybe from it being too tight. But anyway, we shall take a look at that. We might be able to tidy that up a little bit with some lacquer, but not a lot I can do with it. Okay, all looking good so far. So this is a hybrid slinky set, which kind of match what was on there before, very close. So I'm just pulling through about another 2 inches after, you know, to have about 2 inches to wind onto the post, and it starts with a right angle turn and then winding it on. Anyway, so we shall see. I'll wait for an email back from James to see if he wants these new tuners, and then I'll change those out. I should be able to keep the same strings on the Squier. I've got some more 9s that arrived today, but that's all I've got at the moment. I don't have the hybrid 9s for the Strats, but anyway. So there we are, our new set of bass strings. Over on the shelf I've inherited another living creature. Well, in fact, it came in last night and one of the cats brought it in. It was yummy as usual, and it's a sort of field mouse, it's a field mouse with those nice big ears. Unfortunately it's a bit broken, this one, and I put it in a warm box with a bit of water and left it overnight, safe from the attention of the cats, and unfortunately, that sounds terrible to say, but unfortunately it was still alive. It is still alive this morning, so I feel very sorry for it, and I don't have the means to there you go, little fella, you eat your stuff. Oh my god, I have to show you this. I don't know if we've got any battery power here. Let's try and I put him some food, and actually he's eating away there. Can you see? And his back legs don't work, bless him, but he's got an appetite. And I guess it's the best I can do for him, which is to keep him alive and look after him a bit. I don't like playing God with them, but I also don't like killing them off. I just can't bring myself to do it. Anyway, he doesn't seem worried. He kind of just gave me a look, as if to say, is this my new home? Well, thank you. But anyway, so that's the best I can do. I remember years ago I had probably more of a brutal mindset, and I would be able to put them out of their misery a bit quicker. And I would have probably stumped on it or bashed it very quickly with a heavy piece of wood. Sorry about the squeaking noise. That's really annoyingly squeaky, but there we go, there's the guitar with new strings on. And what I'm going to do is just I'm going to do the intonation using the tuner rather than play it out loud. I will play it out loud in a minute because I haven't actually heard it. Make sure all the electrics work, but I'm pretty sure they will. That's E flat. But the cats will come in now and investigate. Oh, little mousey. Right, so that's I'm just checking everything's on full on. So really, I'm just looking for the usual intonation setting. I want the 12th tuned to the 12th fret. I probably want to do it standing up, but without. Oh, I can't stop squeaking. Well, it would help if I was turning the right one. So I want the harmonic, 12th fret harmonic to be the same as the fretted 12th. Which it is there. So it's going to be going up and down in tuning for a little bit, so I still need to kind of pull out as much of the slack as I can do. But we're very close on the intonation. It's obviously been set before in the past. G's alright. The D is fractionally sharp. The A is fractionally flat. D sharp, A flat. E is on. D sharp, A flat. D sharp and A flat, which means a tiny adjustment. What have we got? Both Phillips head and t'other. D sharp, A flat. D sharp is A flat. So if D is sharp, it's too short, and then we will turn it and push it out a little bit. Doink. Stop squeaking. I say sharp, it's got to go the other way then, isn't it? Do. Let's pull it back. A sharp, D sharp. So D was too sharp, so we need to lengthen it instead of doing what I just did, which was go the opposite way. Tiny bit more lengthening, but not much. A tiny bit flat, according to this. I'm not sure I believe that, judging by the location of the things. It is a bit sharp, so we will pull this back a little bit. Twang. Okay, that's that done, intonation set, and the last thing on my little Diddy amp, I'm going to just pull this up here and see how it, just make sure the electrics work basically, and then I'll be done with this one. We'll just be waiting to hear what James wants to do with the tuners. Crackly only through lack of use, really. Crackling from lack of use. Anyway, electrics work, we're done. There you go. It's just a PJ bass. PJ? I keep saying PJ. That's a P bass. That's a J bass. There it is. Done, dusted, ready to go back. So, thank you for watching this. Probably won't see me if James wants new tuners. They're there, waiting to go on. But you won't see it because I won't do it on video. Meanwhile, I'll switch over and we'll do the bass now. The P bass for Chris.